Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm JP Tong, and welcome to today's Detox Your Mind. Today, I'm going to be talking about our loved ones. And as for myself, because I have been moving, since I was a kid, I've been staying in different countries. And throughout my life, I've been very blessed to meet people whom I consider my loved ones. They do not necessarily have to be your family members or your relative. They can be people whom you care about a lot um, throughout, throughout the years, and how they have impacted you either positively or negatively. But as long as you consider them your loved ones, they're close to you, they will definitely have some sort of influence in your life. So, as for me, when I was growing up, when I was a kid, I remember staying in Hong Kong, and because my parents were, had their career there in Hong Kong, and I do remember very vividly that I would have my dad's business partner, his children who were a lot older than me, and they would take care of me and take me out and spoil me. So at that time they were, I was very close to them. They were like my big brothers and sisters, and they would teach me many things. They'll take me around the city and really spoiled me to death because I was like the young baby. Well, I was the youngest, and everyone just took turns playing with me and buying me stuff and all that. So the impact that they had on me, and I still remember because although I was like between 1.5 years old all the way till 6 7 years old, I remember having a great time in Hong Kong because it's always playing, being spoiled. So so um, so that created a habit. That created a habit in me whereby at a certain part of my life, as I was growing up in my adolescent years, I was always looking out for people who would spoil me and who would give me things that I want, be it the attention, be it a toy, um, and take me to wherever I wanted to go. So that led on to my teenage years. So when I was growing up, I was pretty spoiled in that sense, very pampered. And then from there, when I recollect, after I graduated from college in the United States, and when I came back to to Malaysia to work, again, I had that attitude of being entitled, that people should spoil me, I should get what I want. And of course, when you are working, that's not always the case. So I had to readjust again to realize that in life, I should not have this attitude whereby I should be entitled to certain things that I want, and although I want it, it's not necessarily that I will get it, that I will get it. So sometimes, see, when we practice mindfulness, we will have to catch ourselves to actually find out now where did that process of thinking came about. So this is just one example of how people who cared for me, and loved me very much, developed that kind of an attitude in me, and that carried on throughout my adolescent years and all the way into my 20s. Okay. Now another thing that well another person who had a great impact on me was my aunt. because after when I moved back to Malaysia, I think at the age of 6, 7 years old, and but my parents were still commuting from Hong Kong to and Kuala Lumpur. My aunt would take care of me, and I remember very very vividly because she didn't have a very good marriage, and my uncle. And I always saw them fighting, and I would always see my aunt crying, and that had some sort of impact in me because I became very close to her because she became my um, a caretaker of me, almost like a nanny and almost like a substitute mother because I was so young, and my parents would be gone for months, and so I had to stay with my aunt and and play with my cousin who was 5 years older than me. One was 5 years older than me, the other was like 7, 8 years older than me. So again, I was this little kid, and all of a sudden there was a change in the environment. So, and I always remember the impact that my aunt had in my life is this because unfortunately my uncle was not very loyal to her. And it always broke my heart as a kid. Although I didn't express it, but it broke my heart to see her always crying and always, fighting with my uncle, and it was really, really bad. And I would stay, at the living area, just didn't know what to do, felt very helpless. And the impact, now that I think back, the impact that it had on me was that it would always devastate me to see somebody suffering. Um, and I do not want to be in a situation whereby I'm just sitting there feeling helpless. And perhaps it's because of that made me who I am today, who really likes to do charity, and and I always have a soft spot for people who are genuinely in need, and that would trigger me to want to do something within my own capacity. And that experience of how my aunt, who is one of the people whom I love very much, um, the impact that she had on me is that I would be very, very unhappy when I hear of somebody being disloyal to another person, especially in a relationship and all that. It really puts me off, and it's because of the suffering that it inflicts on the other person when you're not loyal. And that is something that I have learned, especially lately, within these few years, whereby instead of me reacting to people who are disloyal, and I get really, really angry with them when I hear that they're disloyal with their partners, I would actually take a step back. So what I'm trying to say is this. So my strong reaction to people who are not loyal to the loved ones, is because of that experience that I've had when I was a kid, and how that would just automatically trigger it. Of course, now that I'm much older and understand and have a much better understanding of how the mind works, then I will be able to understand how a person can be disloyal to the partner or to the loved ones. So, which I will not cover today, but we can talk about it in another episode. So I catch myself, and instead of talking to this person through a lot of emotions of dislike and all that, I'll be more objective. So again, the mindfulness also helps me to be able to be more objective in talking some sense with this person, and help the person see it through that it doesn't help to inflict suffering onto others. And sometimes we have to make choices. very hard choices in life. And these choices are so that we do not continue, um, inflicting suffering onto others. So, so that's another example about loved ones and how, they have such an impact when we grow up. Throughout my life, I'm very blessed to have people who would look after me, who would look out for me. Because a lot of times, well, especially during my teenage years, as you all know, I've been spending a lot of my teenage years in school, in boarding school in the United States. So I considered my close friends when I grow up as my loved ones, and I really cherish them very, very much because they were my family. Because my family was back in Malaysia, and I will only see them during vacations. So I spend most of the time with my friends, and that's why I hold them very dear. And until now, it's been what 30, 40 years. I've been in close contact, and although some of them I only contact 2 or 3 times a year, but every time when we reconnect, we would actually continue where we left off. Okay, and they have had again a huge impact in my life because when I was growing up in the United States, I noticed that I veer towards friends who are older than me, and people who are around my age or younger. I would actually find them very childish and immature. That's why most of my good friends are actually older than me. So and at that time, I would always say, well, because the reason why I enjoy people who are, enjoy friends who are older is because the things that they talk about are more mature and not too much about, playing video games, things that I find very, very childish, which is what, and that was how I thought at that time. That was how I thought at that time. Um, and I would always think like an older person, and hence and that is why when I was in my teenage years, a lot of my relatives and people around my age would say, oh, you're such an old man, you think beyond your age. So hanging out with that circle of friends actually had that impact on me. So I was actually a lot mature than my age, and I will always look up to them. They were my big brothers, they were my big sisters, and I will always draw inspiration from them. And I'll always ask them how I would solve certain problems, in school. I would always pick their mind, and that rubbed off. Some of their wisdom actually rubbed off onto me as well. Um, and they would always, like a big brother and big sister, always guide me guide me along the way. And now in hindsight, now that I think back, I think it's also because it all started when I was a when I was an adolescent in Hong Kong, where where I was so spoiled and taken care of by the much older friends, family friends. So I was used to that environment, and I don't remember me having good friends with people who are similar to my age. I did, but very, very few, and not as good friends as the much older ones. So again, there's no right, no wrong. But you see, when we understand the dynamics of the people whom we surround ourselves with, and what happens in their life, and how they handle different situations, be it how they, I mean, it can be as simple as how they cook for you, how they celebrate certain, like Christmas or Chinese New Year, how they would host the dinner, how generous they are, how stingy they are, how careful they are with the money, or how much they spoil you. Whatever it is that they do, somehow will have an influence on us. Somehow. So again, when we try to understand ourself better, it helps to actually reflect on who we surround ourselves with, whom we called our loved ones. Okay, so not necessarily our family members or relatives. It can be good friends, people whom we love. Okay, whether they love us back or not, that's a different story. Okay, but you know what I mean. So yeah, so think about that because when we realize that, then we are able to catch ourselves. Catch ourselves when we react, whether it's positively or negatively when a similar situation arises. Then we'll be able to, once we catch ourselves, we can actually take a step back and then we look again to see whether or not uh, yeah to look at it objectively so that we are not tainted by our bias and we may be able and we may and because if we're tainted by our bias then we may say the wrong things we may make the wrong decisions, wrong choices, and so on and so forth. Okay, do you have any questions so far? Okay, so moving along. So other loved ones who've had a huge impact on me was when I was in my in my 20s, and when I came back to Malaysia to work, and school friend, my school friend in boarding school, and then after that in my uni in my college days, we went to the same school. So and this particular friend of mine, she's like my big sister. And she's a very daring person. She was somebody, who would, well, she taught me how to play mahjong. Well, she's from Hong Kong, but she taught me how to play mahjong. So that was my first exposure to gambling. And she'll teach me how to cook because we're in boarding school. So she had that impact on me that, you know what, you have to learn everything. And she would take me out to take a bus because we were in a boarding school, and the bus ride was like 2.5 hours to New York City. So at the age of 14, 15, we would actually catch a bus and go to New York City. And she would take me around New York City and walk around and explore the city. And now that I think back, can you imagine when you're 15, 16, when you're like 15 years old, you're still very young. But at that time, we thought it's okay. We were adults already. That's what we thought back then. And in the 80s, it was pretty, it was not a very safe city. Yeah. So, but it didn't cross our mind. So what's my point? She taught me how to live fearlessly, to actually do things courageously and just go out and explore the world since we're young. Because I was more of a timid person. I wasn't as daring because my mom would always take care of everything for me. So I was never very, very proactive in wanting to go here and there, and because again of the environment that I was in, that my mom would actually take care of everything and decide where we go, where to eat, that I was never put in a position of deciding where to go and what to do and all that. So it was quite refreshing to have a bigger sister who actually say, hey, let's go here, go there, and let's explore this, and really push myself to be independent. So that was a great impact. Then after that, when she graduated, I think a year and a half before me, and then from there, then she excelled in her career, and she did very very well. in Hong Kong, and she retired when she was age of 40. So, and she would actually, and every time when I meet her, she would actually, tell me about what she's doing, how she is planning her career, how to be on top of it. And she became and she became a very famous corporate lady in Hong Kong. And as we all know, in Hong Kong, it's not easy to make it up there, but she made it. So, and that was very inspiring. And that was that kind of inspiration and she inspired me to live my life fearlessly and to do things and to be very, very clear with our intention of what is it that we want in our lives, and to actually come up with a a way, like and to work backwards and to kind of uh, strategize how you can actually achieve the goals on a step-to-step basis. So that influence was very strong in me, very, very strong in me. I was inspired on, I was telling myself, oh, I would like to have those qualities that she has so that I can be successful, quote unquote, in my own way. And hence I was looking around, what is it that I really want in my life? So that part of her inspired me to be in search of what is it exactly that I want. So now that I've found it, it's not about my career, it's about my charity work. And that is something that I'm passionate with, and that is something that I hold on to very, very dearly, regardless of others' objections, because in Malaysia, not everyone would think of doing charity as a career, but that never stopped me because I noticed that for people who want to succeed in any kind of endeavors that they want, especially this good friend of mine, although being a lady in an industry that is dominated by men, she came up number one. She was one of the she owned one of Hong Kong's biggest companies in that industry. So again, defying all odds. So she defied all odds, and that again inspired me to actually tell myself, although very few of my friends, almost none of my friends, yeah, supported me um, in doing my charity, and even rel- my family didn't quite understand, what I was trying to do and was not very supportive. But regardless, I stuck on with it, and it's been what 14 years already since I've been doing charity. So, and I'm pretty happy with where I am right now, and having impacted so many people's lives through my charity work. Of course, with the guidance of my teacher. So again, I'm very blessed and very lucky to have that sort of a guidance. So as you can see now, you see how I actually understand how my mind works and where I draw inspiration from, and that is what I call the thought process. How we process our thoughts is because of these influences from people whom we surround ourselves with, whom we call loved loved ones. And if you surround yourself with loved ones who are always stuck in their lives, then that would also have an influence in us. Because why? Because that is what we are used to seeing. So if our loved ones behave in this way, such as not doing anything or being very successful, it somehow has some influence in our lives, in our lives. Okay. And how they handle different situations, be it challenging situations, or be it how they enjoy themselves, how they indulge, or how they help others to be in service to others. That again has a lot of influence in how we are. Okay, so with this program, Detox Your Mind, what I want to do is to invite you all to be aware of all these influences that we have throughout our life, and see and assess them to see what is more beneficial for us right now. Okay, so it's up to us to decide. Has it been beneficial, or is it still as beneficial right now because we're of a certain age and we're going through a certain phase of our life? So if it is, then continue. If it's not, then we need to realize that and catch ourselves, catch ourselves from reacting automatically, and take a step back and look at it again and assess it again. Okay, so if there are certain things that happen to us, for example, another example, if one of your loved ones disappointed you very badly or have hurt you very, very badly, so how do you? And of course, that has a lot of impact on us. Perhaps it has created you to be not as trusting, created something in you that made you very cynical, and so on and so forth. Basically, very negative, you know, and because of that, you become very jaded because in your mind, you may be thinking, wow, even if a loved one can treat me so badly or can disappoint me and or could hurt me so badly, let alone other people. So I rather just shut down and remove myself from everyone. So there are people who are like that. There are people who are like that. So, but when we understand, but that's not living. That's not living. We are just shutting ourselves from reality. So when we understand that, then we ask ourselves, is it worth shutting ourselves away from reality? Is it worth it? Although some of you may say, well, I feel more comfortable. I do not have to deal with the disappointment because, I've been disappointed and hurt so much. So I'd rather not. I'd rather not. So the next question is, but are you happy? Are you really happy with where you are? Are there instances where you wish you had that courage to live your life and not be alive and not live because you're alive? That's the difference. Live your life versus like really living your life versus you are living because you are alive. So for the sake of, so you're just alive and that's it. And there is a difference. There is a difference. So something this is something to think about and for us to assess our mind and really take a look at our loved ones and how they've impacted us throughout the years. And even until now, yes, although we are beginning to understand how our mind works, and we begin to understand how what certain aspects of our mind serves us and what does not, and how our loved ones have actually, how would I say, influence how we perceive reality, influence how we perceive reality. And if the influence is something that is tainted, okay, tainted means it makes us biased and not objective, then perhaps there's something that we can actually acknowledge it and take a step back or step sideways so that we do not perceive reality through the lens of our bias. Okay, so on that note, I think if there's no questions, then that's it for loved ones. So it is a very big topic because again, some of us are surrounded with many uh, people whom we consider loved ones, and it would be most beneficial to assess our relationship with them and our impact. And then from there, we will be able to understand ourselves a lot better. All right. So thank you very much for joining me this evening. Now, at 9:45, I do have a workshop on this topic where I will actually guide you to think about the loved ones, all your loved ones who have influenced you. So if you want to join us, please look for the email that we have on the caption. You can always email to us and we will give you the link. All right. So if you enjoy the program, please share with everyone on your fan page because you never know who out there will benefit from our talk. All right. So on that note, I'll see you next Saturday, same time. Bye bye.